I'm going to be prepared for these songs, for this genre, for all of this stuff before I even get the call. I just made that commitment to learn the songs before I ever got a call, have like a pool, a running list of things that I was going to be familiar with. And I still do that in country music too, even artists that I'm not playing with. If you're looking to jump in with different players, do the work of studying it beforehand, do as much as you can to be prepared for the opportunity even before that call comes.
What is up, everybody? Hopefully you're doing well. Dion, Ken, James, Helen, Christina, how you doing? Chrissy, Bob, what's up, man? I replied to your email yesterday, Bob, so you're good. You got to follow up with me and tell me how that group's going that you're playing in now, because I want to know. Who else we got on here? Oh, I should introduce our guest. Just completely calling names. Everybody, this is Elizabeth, and she is a phenomenal person and a phenomenal player here in Nashville, and so I'm really, really excited. And she is actually our first female guest artist, so that is a cool thing too. Drumming can, I don't know if you find this, but drumming can get to be quite a bro fest sometimes, Elizabeth. So,
sure. And I'm happy to see some females in the room as well.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few. So that's why I was excited about it. So Christina, how are you doing? Have you been playing out any lately?
I'm doing well, yeah. Doing quite a bit. And I've got some questions for Elizabeth.
Ooh, see, she's already queuing them up. Queuing them up. Hopefully the weather's gonna participate with us because I don't know. I keep getting texts from my wife that apparently everything's canceled and bad things are happening. I don't look at the weather ever, so hopefully we make it through this call. But everybody, Elizabeth is a fantastic drummer, and you'll just kind of have to hide your face because I'm gonna read through some of this, Elizabeth. She was just voted one of the 30 under 30 here in Nashville. She's played with artists such as 7-time Grammy Award winner Carrie Underwood. She just got done with a run with her. Was it in Vegas?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Subbing for Garrett, who is her normal drummer. She's been with country music legend Darius Rucker, formerly of Hootie and the Blowfish, Keith Urban, Lady Antebellum, The Voice Australia's finalist Ben Hazelwood, and we can go on with that. And then she also, on top of just kind of like killing it there, she also just finished up a master's in, did you tell me counseling?
Yep, mental health counseling.
That's amazing. My mom, that was what she did. So that's amazing. So now I got to ask, how does that fit into the music world? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah, so I'm actually working at a counseling center here in Nashville during the weekdays when I'm not on the road. And, the beautiful thing about counseling is that you can schedule sessions basically per week. You finish the week and then the next week you determine what days you're available. And so that's been a pretty consistent thing so far and really worked well with the music side of things too. Yeah,
that's awesome. I've got another friend. He's the guitarist for Danny Goki, and he does real estate. And that's what he said. He said, when I'm in town, I'm not just kind of sitting around. I'm able to, still do some work.
You're talking about Miguel, right?
What's
Perez.
that?
You're talking about Miguel, right?
Yeah, Miguel Perez. He's a great guy.
Love that dude.
Now, have you played with Miguel?
So I did a tour with Miguel, actually. This was probably 2018, I want to say. Yeah, it was, I think it was Hit Steep, Toby Mac's tour.
Okay.
And, it was Mandisa out there, Danny Goki out there. I was out with an artist named Holland at the time, bunch of other artists. But yeah, we've done a couple of tours together.
That's awesome. I used to play with one of Mandisa's singers.
Okay.
And now her name is evading me.
Yes,
Janine.
Yes, she's literally like in the crew of two of my best friends.
She's amazing. Yeah. Her and Xander are just awesome. And I was afraid my 9-year-old son at the time was, every time they would come over to the house, he would just get super excited that one of their daughters was coming over. I was like, hey man, chill out just a little bit. Bring it down.
Her daughter.
Yeah, bring it down. So we had all boys in the house. They had all girls. And I was like, guys, they're not going to come over anymore if you freak out every time they come over. So awesome. So we can get to some drums. If you have not been on a live call, They're pretty relaxed, and you can ask your questions. So I would love for you to get to talk to Elizabeth. What I try to do here is anything that my 14-year-old self would have geeked down about living out in the country in Mississippi when I was coming up, we try to do those things. So I really would have geeked down about being able to talk to any drummer that was on the road or in Modern Drummer. So this is your opportunity to get to talk to her, to ask her questions. If you don't want to talk, though, you don't have to. You can put them into the chat, and we will happily ask those for you. And we've got no giveaway today. Sorry. On guest artist days, we don't do a giveaway. Usually we do a giveaway. It's really a thing. Grant has a special effect on his mic. I do a drum roll. It's pretty fun. All right. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and ask those. But I'll start off with a couple of questions. So how did you get you started in New York, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then wound up at Liberty University.
Yeah.
Now, were you a music major at Liberty?
I was a music major, kind of fell into it accidentally, if I'm being honest.
Now, why Virginia from New York?
So I ended up getting a full tuition scholarship to Liberty and figured, well, might as well go to college for free, right? But the funny part is I was doing the traveling teams there, right? And I thought I was going to go to Liberty for I was thinking of either journalism or business. And when I signed up for all my classes with the registrar's office, I guess my admissions counselor assumed that since I was on the traveling music teams that I was going to be a music major. So he just set everything up, put all the music classes in for my first semester. And I really didn't realize that I had been signed up as a music major until I got to the week before classes, orientation week.
It's graduation. You're like, hold on, what?
Yeah, what happened?
This is business. That's hilarious.
Orientation week, and I'm like, well, I guess I could try it for a semester,
Luckily, you picked the more lucrative one besides business, right?
Right, exactly.
I picked my major in an odd way as well. I went into the guidance counselor and I said, so I want to major in music, but I don't ever want to be in marching band, so work that out. And she said, you could be a jazz studies major. And I said, we're going to do it. So I didn't listen to jazz. I didn't at the time. I just listened to punk rock. So I was a jazz studies major with a lot of colors in my hair. So that's great. So you kind of started in Virginia. You were so they had traveling groups out of the school there?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's the percussion professor there?
So when I was there, it's a different person now. I believe his name, I don't want to mess it up. I don't know who's there now, but I know they've had a lot of faculty changeover. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, honestly, the music program was kind of getting revamped. So even by my third year, we had merged with a different department, and a lot of things were changing. But yeah.
Very cool. I always tell people, I'm like, pick the college off of who's teaching there, not of just the name of the university. Yeah. Okay, so you finished up in Virginia and then moved over to Nashville. Was it just kind of a natural move, or did you just move here, on a dream and a prayer?
Once again, it was I fell into it type of thing. I feel like that's just a theme in my story where I'm like, okay, step through one door. Oh, wow, here we go. So I graduated a year early. I was one of those overachievers, classic. I don't know why I was trying to get out of college so quickly, but I squeezed in 28 credits my last semester. I was like, let's do this,
That's a lot of credits. If you've never been to college, that's a lot of credits.
Gosh, it was stupid. But I was finishing up with the traveling teams, and the director of the music teams basically said, hey, how about you do this summer tour, and then I'll connect you with different places that you can interview at. And, the school had lots of connections. So I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great plan. It's a summer job. And also maybe this will lead me to where I want to go. And as we were doing the tour, we opened up for a band that was based here in Nashville. And the lead singer of that band came up to me after the show, and he was just like, hey, I'm not telling you what to do, but you really should consider Nashville. And I was like, no, that's never been my type. A lot of my friends from college had tried making the move and just been really burnt out by it. really got really disenchanted by the whole experience. And so I was like, I know that I'm not even like anywhere near as competitive as some of these classmates of mine. Like if they couldn't make it, there's no way I could make it. Right. So I told this guy, the lead singer, I was like, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it, but that's not for me. And then we did another show that was a Sunday. We did a show following Wednesday, opening up for them once again. And this time he pulls me aside for like 45 minutes, literally holds up his bus. His bus is like, we gotta roll. And he's just standing outside trying to tell me about Nashville. And I don't know, it just kind of like, I was like, man, this guy's really insistent. Kind of planted a seed. And then 2 days later, we were doing another show, and the lighting director for that show was contracted from Nashville. And she goes, hey, I know you're a graduating senior. I don't know if you're thinking of Nashville, but if you are, my lease ends in August, and I'd love to do a rooming situation with you if you're thinking of moving down there. And I thought, how weird. Like that conversation happened 2 days after this other conversation. They didn't know each other. It wasn't connected at all. And so I just thought, all right, let me follow the signs and take a leap of faith and just do it.
That's so great.
This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it.
So you moved to town with a roommate already here.
Yeah. I mean, it was loosely. I had met this person like maybe twice,
Right.
It wasn't that I really had any connections or knew anyone prior to moving. But I just figured, I graduated a year early. I figured, well, worst case scenario, I could do this for a year and then move on to quote unquote real life, get a real job. And by the end of that first year, I was just like, okay, I love this too much. Too many things are happening for me to leave,
Right. Now, when you got to town, I always ask everybody, what was the area that you moved to?
I actually moved to the cheapest apartment that I could find in Franklin. It was like in the Cool Springs area.
Yeah, I moved to like Nippers Corner area, which is where like 3/4 of people move before it's just a cheap area.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, when you moved to town, did you start doing the Broadway thing? Did you start just kind of laying back and meeting people?
Yeah, I actually have never done the Broadway thing, surprisingly.
And you're better for it. Well, I say that I did Bourbon Street. My college career was a little bit different. I quit for over 2 years because I got a gig on Bourbon Street. Okay. And so I went down there and did that full time in New Orleans. Yeah. And then I was, there were way too many people with crack habits and just, really bad habits. And I said, I could stay here, but I think probably I'm going to exit now and go back to school. So school took me way longer than your speedy pace.
Yeah.
So you never did the Broadway thing?
Never did the Broadway thing. No, I moved to town and basically sent out like cold emails to different managers and record labels. Like I know that stuff typically ends up in the trash can. Like they get so many emails from musicians being like, please give me a chance. But I was that girl. I sent out a bunch of emails. I had put together this website that kind of was acting as my portfolio, and then I emailed a bunch of managers and I just said, hey, I love such and such artists that you have and we'll love to get a chance to play with them at some point if you're looking for anyone. And I knew those emails probably would get nowhere, but I was like, that's the only shot that I have. I can't think of any other option to get my foot in the door other than just showing up at a record label, which is pretty awkward,
Right.
So I sent these emails out and it just so happened that one of them happened to be looking at his inbox. He told me later, he literally pulled me aside after I had gotten the gig with his artist. He goes, in my 20 something years of managing, I have never done this before. When I got your email, I happened to be looking at my inbox rather than my assistant. And the crazy thing is my assistant knows that whenever we get any of these emails, I tell her to just throw it straight in the trash. Like we don't even entertain those emails. But I happened to be looking at my inbox. I happened to click on your email and I happened to go, I feel like I need to give this girl a chance. So he did. He called me up. It was actually the day that I was driving into Nashville. Someone on his team called me up and they said, hey, would you be willing to audition for this? And then I ended up playing with that artist.
Very cool. So we get this would be a good point to kind of kick off some questions. And if you have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat, and then we'll just kind of get to everybody in the sequence that they come in at. So we have some students that are, they are playing in their church. We have some that never want to play outside of their basement. We have some that just do it for family fun. And then we have some that are pretty serious, doing it part-time to full-time, and some that are just weekend warriors. But the question that we get a lot, and that we field all the time is the networking side of this. How do I meet other musicians? Even if they just want to go out and jam with other people. So they've never played with anyone, they just want to get out and meet people. And so I have my own things that I tell, but what are some things that some kind of pointers you would give for people that are wanting to get out and maybe just play with other people, maybe get in at their church, maybe play, with a group on the weekends or full time?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the opportunity begins even before you get the opportunity. Like when I first moved to town, I thought of it as whatever opportunity that comes for me to play, I'm going to not just get prepared once that opportunity comes. Like I'm going to be prepared for these songs, for this genre, for all of this stuff before I even get the call. So when I first moved to town, I was doing a lot of work within the churches and just kind of filling in on random things. A lot of it was playing for free, honestly. And I just made that commitment to learn the songs before I ever got a call, have like a pool, a running list of things that I was going to be familiar with. And I still do that in country music too. Even artists that I'm not playing with, I go, it's going to be good for me to have this repertoire under my finger and at least have an understanding of the style, how this drummer records, how this drummer processes the music. I will dive into that type of thing all the time where I just study, even like a live touring drummer. I'll be like, okay, how do they typically approach this song? What are some of their go-to moves that if I can pick that apart, I can kind of pick apart their playing style, So I would say if you're looking to jump in with different players, do the work of studying it beforehand, do as much as you can to be prepared for the opportunity even before that call comes.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of free work too. I know a lot of guys and ladies are, they want to get paid to play immediately. But I can trace almost everything that I've ever played on, gotten to be a part of. Well, this business, in fact, I posted free lessons on YouTube for 2 years. And so you seem to also be a proponent of, obviously not always playing for free. We got to eat, but letting that be kind of your entry into your foot in, if you will.
I think you have to recognize your business as it grows, basically, and a lot of musicians don't want to view their craft, their gift as a business, but in many ways, unless you're doing it as, just for fun, it is a business. And so just as any business person would approach their organization and find ways to grow it, same thing within the music industry too. I think, when you're first trying to market, there are some gigs that you're going to have to take that are just for free, because that's going to be an opportunity for you to get connected with other players, or even it's just going to be an opportunity for you to practice your skills in front of people. That's such a big thing too. Like, we think of performing as like, oh, once I get in front of this audience, then it's going to be amazing, right? But it's like, no, it's a muscle memory type of thing where as you play, nerves come up. You have to manage all these things that are taking place in your body and all the anxiety or the excitement, and figure out how your body interacts with even having people in the room. It's very different from practicing in your garage, and so being able to just take those opportunities and recognize that maybe it's not of monetary value, but it is of value in other ways.
Yeah, this is a good conversation, because I had a student that emailed in a couple of months ago, and she got the opportunity to audition for, in her country, I forget which country she's in. It was a rather large artist. Mm-hmm. And so she was really excited and prepared all the music and got all the stuff. And then she walked me through what happened once she got to the audition. And she said, then they called me up, and I get up there, and there's just this big drum set, and I'm not used to it, so I'm trying to set everything that's to my levels, and then all of a sudden I've got this monitor, and they're wanting me to set my own levels, and all of a sudden it was like and she said, and it went horrible. I couldn't, and I told her, I said, well, the funny thing is you knew all the tunes, and you actually would have probably been great on the gig. I said, but the thing that derailed you was all the externals that happen on a gig that we're oftentimes not prepared for, being able to play on a kit that's not ours, adjusting things quickly, I'm big on an order of operations when I get to a gig, having a set list that I go through of, like, I'm checking my own in-ears, I'm doing this, in this sequence. So it's interesting that you talk about a lot of what I would call the externals at a gig. They're not the real obvious parts. We often just, focus on the playing, but there's so much more.
I was actually just joking around with some bandmates last week, and we were talking about how, you kind of get all this experience just to realize that probably half of Nashville could do what you do, right? Like there's tons of other musicians that could play play all the things, play the fills, have the chops, all of that stuff, right? But the thing that sets musicians who are on those high level gigs apart is that, honestly, it's a mental game at that point, right? Mm-hmm. You're not just walking through, oh, can I play this fill? You're going, can I play this fill in front of 10,000 people without my brain screwing me up and telling me that I'm going to not know what B1 is,
Right.
Like, there's so much more to that than just getting through the fill at that point. It's managing all these things that are happening in your body.
Yeah. And it's whenever you get the opportunity, I was just talking to my wife about a bass player I used to play with, and he'd gotten let go from some very prestigious gigs, and the reason was not at all his playing. He's an amazing player. But it was his attitude, and it stunk. He was always complaining, whether it was complaining about bus call, or complaining about the pay, or complaining about the venue, or complaining about, and it was multiple artists and multiple players that were like, yeah, I can't use him as a sub anymore because he's just kind of sour when he comes out, So how much do you think that has played a part? Because one of the first things that Scott Williamson is who told me about Elizabeth. For everybody that would like to know, you can go check out Scott's calls in the guest artist area. And that was the first thing he said. He said, man, she's such a great person. She's such a great hang. And that was the first thing that came to mind. So how did you work on that? Was that something consciously that you were aware of?
Well, first of all, Scott is so sweet to say that. I think he's a delight to be around. So same words towards him. You know, when I first moved to town, I had a mentor in college actually that said, you know, talent will get you recognized, but character is what keeps you in the seat. And I thought, man, that's so true, right? We can have things that impress people based off of our skill set. But if we're not a good hang, if we don't have good character, even, you know, if we're not working on ourselves personally, yeah, we're going to end up really ungrateful. We're going to end up really sour and bitter. And I think that's what I recognized when I saw my other friends who had tried moving to Nashville and it just didn't work out. I was like, there's some work to be done more than just getting prepared musically.
For sure.
You got to be prepared in knowing how to ask for what you need, drawing good boundaries, you know, like if you know that you're going to go into a gig situation and you've spent 20 hours working on the music and you know, the artist is like, hey, I can pay you X amount of dollars and it's really low. And then, you know, that the artist is going to expect you to have to unload the whole trailer and, you know, it's going to be brutal outside and it's 20 degrees weather and, you know, all these factors that are going to go into the gig. Right. Well, it's not so much on them that I said yes to that. Right. They asked. Right. And I had every right to draw my own boundaries and say, well, you know what? I just don't think it's going to be worth my time to do that. The lowest that I can go for this show would be X amount of dollars, you know, or the best that I can do is I'll come and set up my drum kit, but I can't pull out everything else from the trailer, you know?
Right.
And there's multiple reasons for that, right? It could be, hey, I know that type of work is pretty dangerous and my hands are really like that's like my moneymaker, right? Like I've got to keep my hands intact and not break them while trying to pull out, you know, a whole PA rig from the trailer, right? And so I really just, I know that that's a boundary for me. I can't be in the trailer setting up gear, pulling out gear because I've got these other really important gigs coming up and I don't want to be unreliable for these other artists that I've committed to as well. Right. So there's multiple reasons why it's a good idea to draw boundaries.
Right. Okay. So I do want to get to some questions. You all have started raising your hands. Sometimes y'all don't know this about yourselves, but you sometimes take a little while to warm up. I'm just saying. So we've got Chris and then James and then Christina. And if anybody else wants to ask questions, just raise your hands. Absolutely. Or put it in the chat. You don't have to talk. We won't. And if you don't have video, you don't have to have video to talk. Right? It does not matter at all. So I think it was Chris that was first in line.
Thanks, Stephen.
What's up, man?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thanks, yourself.
I'm good.
Hey, Elizabeth, by the way, I just had, you know, of course, Googled you and watched a bunch of footage and amazing career. Just fantastic. Yeah, truly an inspiration to us weekend warriors. I would definitely put myself in that category. Stephen has known me for a bunch of years. I play in a country band locally. We get out once a month, but it has literally just opened up. I'm up in Toronto, Canada. Restaurants and bars have just opened up today, as a matter of fact, to 100% capacity. So it's been a slog. We haven't played anywhere for 2 years. It's been that restrictive up here.
That's
so
I knew it had been restrictive up there, man. But they're now. You guys are 100% capacity.
Yeah, we're the worst. We're the worst country in the world for that. We shut down everything.
Yeah, y'all really
so did. We couldn't even get together. One of my bandmates got his 85-year-old mother living with him, and he's just afraid to catch anything. So, but you know, that aside, I hear what you say about having to do something for free once in a while. I think because of the bars and restaurants haven't made any money for a lot of time. We're going to go back to all the places we used to play and just at least give them the first gig for free. Just so they can make a bit of their money back. So I hear that. So, Elizabeth, what I wanted to hear from you, and I love, I mean, I don't get to talk to like touring and great people like you very often, but do you got a funny story about when some equipment like failed, like a cymbal fell on you or a snare head broke or something like that? I just want to, a funny story.
That's a great question. There were a lot of lessons learned over the years in failed equipment. Probably one of my worst. Thankfully, this happened on the outro of a song, so it wasn't like it was the whole set. But at some point, somehow, my beater went straight through my kick drum head. And if you know how that works, you know that there's no easy backup to change your kick drum head. I don't know what it was. I don't know whether there was already, in the travel or setup, whether something had punctured it at all, or, because that just doesn't happen. Like, you can't easily break a kick drum head, right? And it was one of those things where, like, I'm playing and I'm looking down and it's the outro of the song and we're going real hard, and I'm just recognizing, you can start feeling it, right? And I'm like, there's not like, I can't even fix it. If I could gaff tape this real quick, that could be a fix, but I don't have time. I'm in the middle of the outro. I don't have time to even pull out gaff tape and try to throw it onto the head, So I just kept going. And thankfully the actual last hit, it went straight through the head.
That's hilarious. When I was 19, it happened to me at a club, and you did better than I did because I thought, it'll sound the same if I kick it. I wasn't a smart kid, so I kicked it, and that hurts. Don't do that. And it doesn't sound at all the same. There's barely any noise. So
it's amazing.
Let's see, James. I think you were next, James, and then we got Christina.
Hey, Elizabeth, how are you?
Hey, James, I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Appreciate you doing this today.
Yeah, thanks.
So when people ask me about the drums, I like to say that it's the most easy instrument to play. Anybody can pick up a stick and hit a drum, but the most difficult to play well. There are so many variables with it that you could literally take one aspect and spend a year on just that aspect. But at 62, I'm not 22, I can't do that. So as being someone that loves contemporary Christian music as well as country, what are the areas that you think are best to focus your time on for those areas?
Yeah. This sounds like maybe an unconventional answer, but I think the power of listening to music first really helps us to absorb even knowing how to play it. I know that sounds so strange because the typical response would be like, here's this exercise to work on, or here's this thing to do, right? And listening to music seemingly has nothing to do with playing music, but in my opinion, it has everything to do with playing music. Like, even if you're, say, you're just a hobbyist and you don't have a lot of time to devote to practicing behind your kit, right? Even in the little moments of like getting ready in the morning or like driving to work, whatever it is, I think being able to absorb different styles of music, for me, I'm going to be honest, even as a full-time drummer, I don't always have the time to practice all the time. Like, it's sad, but there are some times where I have gig after gig lined up and practice time, like personal practice time, really just diminishes. And in those seasons, I tell myself, okay, as much as I can listen to music, I'm going to do it, because I'm going to absorb that information. It comes through my ears and it's going to be absorbed in how I process my playing. And I think that's the bit of advice that I can give if there's a time limit to how much you can sit behind your kid, or even if there's just, you've gotten to the point where you're like, I've practiced as much as I can and I don't know what else to do.
So I'm glad you mentioned. Oh, sorry, James.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I talk a lot about listening, especially when it comes to learning music. For me, the listening is where we learn the song form, chord changes. We learn where's the verse, where's the chorus, all of that. And when we sit down at the drums, that's the time to sort out, okay, I know I'm going to have problems with this section and this section because I've listened to it 8,000 times. And there's a study that you might be interested in, Elizabeth, the role of deliberate practice in the acquisition of expert performance. And so what they found that the elite in any field spent, because they could only really practice 2 to 3 hours a day at the most. And they saw diminishing returns after that. And that was with 1 to 2 days off a week. But the thing they found was that how much music related activity they did every day was heavily correlated to how much practice they had done. So on the weekends, because they were hanging out with friends, their practice may go down, but their musical related activities would go up, and it would almost supplement for that gap in practice time. Then during the week, whenever they were practicing, they would kind of level back out. And to me, listening is a music, related activity, obviously.
Absolutely.
So
And
learn it. Go ahead.
I would even add to that to say that sometimes when we just play over things, we actually aren't learning something, right? Like I can't tell you how many students I've talked to where, they're like, man, I'm playing to this track and I don't know if I'm really improving much, because the initial thing is when I get the music to learn, I jump straight into it, right? And I go, hold on. Like my recommendation is that you sit with the music for 3 days before you ever even get behind a kit to play it. Because what you're doing at that point, if you just jump in and you start playing over the songs and you're like, cool, my job is to learn the form, right? And you just immediately jump in and start playing over the songs, you're not actually absorbing how that drummer approached the song. All you're hearing back is your own playing. So you're not going to gain new information when you're focusing on what you're doing rather than what the original track was doing, right? So my recommendation is sit with the music, absorb the music for 3 days. And then when you approach the song, like I like having my in-ears in first without I have a whole setup, kind of like what you have, Stephen, where I'll I have all my drums mic'd and everything can run it through the system. But I like having my drum mics completely off and I'm just listening to the song as I'm playing it. So I would do 3 days just listening to the song, then another day or two playing to the song, but hearing mostly the original drum track. And then finally, after I feel completely comfortable and know the parts and know the feel of the song and how the drummers approached it, then I'll actually hear myself playing it, but a lot of it is trying to learn not the mechanics of what I do, but more so the mechanics of what the other person was doing.
Right. Now,
Very interesting.
stylistic.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Stylistically, whenever you're learning a new style, you talked about when you came to town, we're learning country music.
Mhm.
I know for me, I'll listen to a player and then I'll go, well, wait a second, who were they listening to before they recorded this? Or wait a second, who was this artist influenced by? And then, I'm looking up, what did they eat before bed? It gets weird. But I know when I was in New Orleans, that's what did it. If I kept trying to play second line, I grew up in Mississippi, I just could not play it. I was just the whitest white kid ever trying to play second line. And it wasn't until I played on Bourbon Street and I knew what the French Quarter smelled like at 3 a.m. and I knew what the summers felt like and I knew what funerals looked like and all of that. And then I didn't actually have to work. I just sat down one day and it was greasy. It was what they would call in the cracks. And the culture for me really kind of led the way for that. Do you find that whenever you're learning any new styles that trying to look at it from a holistic point helps at all?
Definitely. Absolutely. To be honest with you, I didn't grow up in country. I grew up in New York City, so we didn't have country. I mean, I could think of, maybe some country songs that I came across as a kid growing up, but it was very much, just kind of pop. I listened to mostly pop, mostly, I got into my Avril Lavigne days and, that was what I grew up listening to, right? Paramore was a big influence. It wasn't country at all. And so when I came here and started getting the calls for that type of thing, I was like, I've got some studying to do. I've got to just listen. And it was what you said, where I can even look back on things 8 years ago that I had tried diving into and I just couldn't get the feel right. Couldn't understand the mechanics of it. And I go, oh, wow, even though I haven't been working on that for the past 8 years, not working specifically on that song or that technique, now 8 years later, I go, wow, that kind of comes second nature just because I've been surrounded by it. And I've been absorbing bits and pieces of other people approaching that style, and now it feels like, yeah, I can, do that shuffle, or I can make it feel like a country song just because I've been around it.
Right. We got a real quick question from Steven, and then you, Christina. Steven wants to know what part of New York City he was born and raised in Queens.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So I was born in Manhattan, grew up in Brooklyn, and then my parents, for like all of my middle school, high school years, ended up moving to Queens. So a little bit of all the boroughs.
Okay, Christina, what you got?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being here today. So anytime I get any advice from a female drummer is fantastic. So I'm clearly an older female drummer. And then you put on top of that I only started taking lessons 5 years ago. So that puts me in a category that, most drummers aren't. So I play in 2 bands. We do get paid, so I guess that makes it professional, but not a whole lot. It's local and it's small things. But what I want to ask you about is reactions, not only reactions from musicians and non-musicians both that listen to me, but my reaction to them as well. So I usually get one of 3 reactions. Either females will tell me, musicians or not, that, it's fantastic. It's, just doing what I'm doing is unusual. So, there's the kudos for that. And then from guys, it's usually either praise and surprise, because do I look like I could play the drums? No. And then I can. So it's that kind of thing. Or I get the other end. Like I had a guy just a couple weeks ago, as I was setting up the drums, he said, why don't you bang on that thing and get it warmed up for the drummer? And so I didn't say anything. I just watched his face when I started to play. Mm-hmm. And that was good enough. But I don't know how to react most of the time to the different kinds of reactions that I get from people. So what's your advice there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, good for you for just holding your ground. I think it is an interesting thing to be a female drummer in a predominantly male environment, and I can't say that there's any easy answer to that. I think that that's a really great question. And for me, my approach has been, whether it's the gender topic or whether it's any other field, there's always, or even just living life, there's always going to be people that make speculations, or even people that disagree with me, but my job is not to try to convince the people who don't enjoy what I do, right? My job is actually to, if you think of the role of a performer, an entertainer, right? My job is to help the people who want to be there enjoy it. So when I'm not focused on trying to prove something to the sideline people that are booing, right? Or the people who don't get it, right? I'm then able to maintain an attitude of gratitude for those who are actually there to enjoy it, and I think that will speak for itself. I'll actually tell a quick story because this has happened to me before. Sadly, it's not a isolated thing for us female drummers. I remember I was doing a program run out in LA, and we were playing in Silver Lake, and it was this pretty, reputable club that we were playing. And it was a house kit situation. So, the band before us finishes, I get up there, and I'm noticing that a couple of pieces of hardware is missing, like the kick pedal wasn't there anymore. They were missing a clutch, just random small pieces, right? So I go up to the house engineer who's managing the club for this night. And I say, hey, my name's Elizabeth, good to meet you. And I put out my hand and this was pre-COVID, right? I put out my hand to shake his, and he just stares at me. He doesn't put his hand back out, just stares at me. And it felt probably 20 seconds that I was just holding my hand there. And he shook his head. And he was very like reluctant in getting me what I needed, right? And finally I was like, okay, whatever, like I can't be worried. So we get going and I play the set. And afterwards he comes up on stage and he's cleaning things off, tearing things down. And he goes, all right, I was wrong. You're not too bad. And it's funny because I thought, man, had I allowed that to bum me out for the whole set, it would have been I would have had a different approach. I would have just been trying to play for him and missed out on playing for a room full of people that actually wanted to see us perform, So I think really a lot of it has to do with perspective for me. There's always going to be people that speculate and wonder if you're any good because you're female and all that stuff. But it's like, all right, you can have your opinion. I'm just going to keep doing me.
Thank you for that. I just love to play. I wish I discovered it decades ago, at your age. I just love it. So whether I get paid or not, or if there are people like, that, and there almost always is,
Mhm.
But then there's others that just plain love it as well. So, I just like to be there doing it, what it's like.
Yeah. And I love that perspective because I would say go back to why you started playing, what you love, like remind yourself of the gratitude that you have even just for being there. I have to do that all the time too. Like I have to go, oh my gosh, like apart from doing all the business side of things and trying to negotiate all these different things, right? Really, I need to sometimes get back to the basics of just reminding myself like the 14-year-old kid would have been amazed that I even get to do this, whatever age you start, right? It's like there was a spark that came, and that, that we all know that first year of playing where it's like, this is so fun and I'm learning so many things rapidly and I'm absorbing all this information, right? And then you kind of teeter off as you get going, maybe like year 3 or 4, it's like, okay, the growth isn't as seemingly quick, right? And this is kind of becoming norm to me and not as exciting. But when you get into those moments where you hear a sour comment, right, it's just the reminder of like, why do I do this? Well, because I loved this, and that's what keeps you going even when you have those weird shows or those moments where people say awful comments. It's like, well, even if they're not enjoying it, I can enjoy it for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Aside to that, I was watching a video of Hannah Welton the other day, Elizabeth, and my daughter, she's 4 now, and I love Hannah's pocket and I love her enthusiasm for her playing. And so she walked up and she said, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Oh, this is a really good girl drummer." And so she kind of squinted at me and then she started watching it and she started bopping her head and it got done. And she looked at me real serious. She said, "She's not the only girl drummer." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Okay." So then we went down to the drums and she sewed me. So anyway, okay, Sean, we got a question.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, nice to speak to you. You have to excuse my voice. I'm at home at the moment with COVID, so just getting over it. On the site, I'm pretty much known as the guy that just goes on and on about basics. I was just wondering if there's any sort of exercises or techniques that you first learned, like basic stuff that you've just stuck with you and that you still practice. Yeah. It's a question that I tend to ask any of the well-known performers that come on, sort of thing, like,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I can think of a lot of different things, and I'm trying to, narrow it down to one thing that I think is really important to know. I think one, maybe this isn't so much an exercise, but one thing that I try to keep in mind as I'm playing is how I'm actually holding the stick, right? A lot of players get into this habit of holding it sideways, which if you're playing lightly, that's totally fine. But if you're playing something really heavy, your typical radius doesn't do this. Your this tendon here goes up and down this way, right? And so one of the things that I try to keep in mind that I don't injure myself, because I have before, playing, especially doing rock stuff or, pop stuff where you're slamming the drums. I remind myself to keep it this way. And that way you also have easy access to your fingers, right? You can kind of go like that. If you're holding it sideways, your fingers that's not going to be a natural motion to go like that, right? So keep it down so you have the most speed. That's something that I keep in mind. One exercise that I did for foot training is just doing a basic beat, like, on 2 and 4, snare on 2 and 4, and then doing 16th notes with my kick, adding 1 every single measure that I go. So the first would be on 1, right? Second measure would be 1E, third 1E and then just keep going. And you finally get to the point where you're doing 16th notes for the entire measure. And I would just keep that going in order to build foot speed and endurance.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sean, feel better, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So the fever and everything's stopping. It's just the coughing now. So.
Yeah, man. We had it. Well, we got a sinus infection the 28th of December, my wife and I, and then 2 weeks later, she had bronchitis, but 2 weeks later we got COVID. And so it was like 6 weeks we were sick, and the cough held on it was just like last week that we got rid of our nighttime cough. It just held on forever. So feel better, man.
Tomorrow's the first day back on the pad for me.
Nice.
I haven't even been on the drum pad in days, so I'm looking forward to. I got a few days off now, so I'm going on the drum pad tomorrow. I can't get near the kit, so I'm going on the pad.
I like it, man. David, what's up? Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on. Nope, not yet.
Nope.
You hear?
No. Now we can hear you. Oh, now we can't hear you.
Fine.
Almost. We had you for a second.
Now you've got me, haven't you?
Yep,
Yeah.
now I got you.
Yeah, my finger control was a bit bad there. I kept hitting the mute. Sorry.
Gotcha.
So really, I was a drummer a long, long time ago. I had a 20-year break, and I've come back to drumming. And during this COVID period, it's been quite something fantastic for my mental health to get back to playing. And you were mentioning at the start there, you were talking about you're doing a counselling, or you've just done a counselling. Do you think you're going to combine the two? Because I've got friends who do music therapy, and I've been to a few of the sessions to help out with some of the percussion and things like that. And it's just amazing, to be honest. And I just wondered if that was somewhere you'd go. I know it's not really a drumming question, but it's just, thinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question a lot. I really do want to integrate both, honestly. I don't know whether I would do like full-on music therapy at this point, but at the same time, a lot of the therapy side of what I do comes into interactions on the road, and even just how I approach my own playing. Because like I said earlier, there's such a mental game, and I know especially with COVID and it just, all how it's affected the industry, how it's affected people's finances and, people's normal rhythms of life. It really has been a devastating thing to a lot of musicians in the music industry. And so I would love in some way, shape or form, maybe that's not like doing like a drum circle, right? Maybe it's not something like that. But maybe it's even just getting together with musicians and finding ways that we can incorporate mental health into this space of music as we're trying to pick back up the pieces. So most definitely, and I appreciate you asking that, David.
That's great. So I've got a second part to my question now, more general one. What do you listen to when you're just listening? If I don't mean when you're trying to learn, or what is your kind of what's your go-to stuff? And I know it'll be wide and varied because it all is, but
yeah. Oh my gosh, it definitely is wide and varied. Right. I'll tell you what I've been listening to right now. What I've had going on my phone is Lainey's new record. I've listened to a lot of Astrid S is an artist that I've really gotten into. Patrick Droney's new record, State of the Heart, that just came out a couple months ago. That's been an incredible record. And the fun part is some of my friends actually recorded on that record. So it's fun getting to enjoy something, knowing that like, oh, I knew like, I know the drummer and the bass player that actually tracked on this record. And I think that it's a brilliant record, you know. Let's see, what else? This morning I went back to listen to Maren Morris's record.
That's such a good album.
It's such a great album. Yeah. It really is a hodgepodge of things, honestly. Yeah, I try to keep the options very widespread, you know. So I think like 2 days ago I was listening to Nora Jones too, you know. It's just kind of like everywhere.
Yeah.
So go ahead, David.
I was just saying cool. Sorry, Steve.
Oh no, you're good. Nora, you mentioned Nora Jones. Nora Jones. So music for me actually reminds me of times in life. And so the Nora Jones, her first album was when I was in college and we were living in my grandmother's old house. She'd passed away. We were taking care of it until, I think it was my aunt moved in eventually. So I was painting the whole thing and I listened to Nora Jones' album just on repeat while I was doing that, because I'd be on a ladder and it would, you know, play back around. And I love Brian Blade too. Yeah, so every time I hear Nora Jones' older stuff, that's what I think of as painting a house, you know?
It's kind of crazy how it brings you back, right?
Oh yeah, I can smell smells whenever I, you know.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, especially when it's like, I don't know, I feel like things when I was younger were just more like everything felt more tactile and more like I was being overwhelmed by the senses, you know, like, and so when I listened back to some of those records that I first like Paramore, you know, I remember distinctly driving, like being in my parents' minivan in the very back seat, you know, going on road trips or even just driving in New York City and having my earbuds in, listening to Paramore. And there's so much nostalgia in that for me. You know, it's almost like you can be transported back to exactly what you saw and you were smelling and you were, you know, it's like everything right in that moment.
Yeah. And anybody that wants a fun experience with music, I've been doing this with my kids for probably the past 6 months or so, since I discovered that it was actually a really cool thing. Because I've got Spotify and one son is 11 and one is 14. And so I actually don't think the way to get them into music is to sign them up with lessons and I actually think music is the way to get into music. And if I hook them on music, then I hook them on an instrument. So we spend a lot of time just listening to music. And one of my favorite things to do now is to hand them the phone and be like, man, find us something to listen to. So then they start rummaging through Spotify and they both got their playlists. And so and it leads to a lot of great conversations. I find out a lot of music that I didn't know or some that I remember. And then we have a lot of conversations where I can be like, hey, you know, the drummer for that, or, oh, you know, that band was inspired by this band. And then we'll go back and, oh, I like that band. Well, and then we kind of connect the dots with the music. It's been really fun. They're on a Weird Al Yankovic kick right now, and that's been hard. But once we get past that, I think it'll go back to fun. Right now, Weird Al's 12-minute songs they're a bit much for our drives, but, let's see. Do we have any more questions? Let's see.
Nothing in the chat right now.
Nothing in the chat? Okay, cool. I've got another question for Elizabeth. And then if you want to talk to Elizabeth or you just have a question, we'll put it in the chat, throw your hand up. If we don't have any that come in, then we'll kind of wrap the call up. Okay, so Elizabeth, the thing that a lot of people talk about with you and your playing is how passionate you are about your playing and when you're on stage. How much it's very physically obvious that you enjoy the music and what you're doing, and that's something that I have gotten over the years as well. It's a different energy live than it is, say, on a recording. And so maybe speak to that some. Where did that come from? Is it just the show, or are you truly just that into it?
I think part of it is really just enjoying the music, enjoying the fact that I get to perform. And I do think that it's just like a genuine overflow from what I am experiencing myself during the show. I will say that I recognize when I'm not as prepared, I will tend, or if I'm more nervous for a show, I will tend to get a little bit more withdrawn. And so part of my job when I'm prepping for shows is to say, okay, not just can I play the music, but can I play it without thinking? Is it muscle memory at this point so that I really can enjoy the moment and make it musical and go for things, without worrying whether I'm going to land it. And then part of it too, I actually wanted to take a moment to speak to the like mechanics of it all, because I know we have a couple of female drummers on the call, and one of the things that people have noticed in my playing is that I sit pretty high up on the kit, and through the years I've learned that one, like it really isn't just for like being seen or any of that. Some people are like, are you sitting high on the kit so that like it's something like that people can see better or whatever? And I'm like, no, it's not that. A lot of it has to do with the fact that for female drummers, our just with our makeup, our upper body doesn't tend to be as strong, right? And so if I'm sitting under the kit, I'm actually working myself harder, and I'm not able to enjoy the set as much. Like if I'm sitting super low on the kit, I'm going to become tired sooner, especially if I'm doing a 90-minute set, right? So part of being able to actually enjoy the show for me is first figuring out how my body can operate in the most optimal manner. And so I sit higher up on the kit so that there's greater endurance. And I really can just think of like, hey, my muscles are doing, they're being pulled with gravity rather than me working against gravity and trying to hit way up, because as a female drummer, I'm not going to have as much of that upper body strength and be able to have the stamina to carry that through the show, especially if I'm doing something really intense. So I know that's kind of like a side topic, but goes into what, you were asking about enjoying the show and the performance part of it. A lot of it has to do with whether I'm physically able to show up in those moments.
So that's interesting. You should bring that up as far as just the physical disparities between, the different sexes. So one thing I talk about with technique is we could talk about traditional versus match grip. A lot of cats like to play, if they play jazz, they'll play jazz in like a traditional grip, but then when they go to pop, they'll play that. And one of the things that, we point out a good bit here is traditional grip is naturally a lighter grip. Traditionals, you were talking about the movement of the wrist and how much it can move. And actually the biggest rotation of the wrist is this way. And this would be the second biggest. And this is the most limiting. I injured myself too doing that. But your hand is actually under the stick here. It's not on top of it, And whenever you're holding in a German grip, you've got more of a weight. Not only do you have more wrist motion, but you've got a weight on top of that stick. Whereas in French, you're, again, cupping the stick. And so you don't have that weight on top of it. The stick is more held in your hand instead of this way. So it's interesting you bring that up, because I think about that a lot when I'm playing. And if I go to play a lighter thing, you'll see my hands start to rotate out naturally. It's just kind of a lighter, touch.
Yeah. And that's a lot to do with it, knowing what type of setting that you're playing in, right? Because I was talking with someone, I forget who this was. I was talking with someone and he goes, yeah, I tried playing traditional, and it was like kind of like heavier playing. And he showed me he had like blisters all over, Yeah. And it's like, okay, that could work for the style of music you were playing before, right? But knowing, okay, what is it that if I'm going to play hard, right? How do I do it so I'm not injuring myself by trying to, slam down on my hand in a motion that's really going to cause the shock to come back to my elbow, And that was a lot of, I would say, when I started touring pretty consistently, was playing probably anywhere from 150 to 200 shows a year, I started having to be really mindful of that, because I did develop, I remember going, you know how, so on these big tours, they have chiropractors that come in every, now and again, and they'll just do like free massages, or they'll hook you up with a 30-minute session or something like that. And I remember going into one of these chiropractors, and she was like, you have pretty bad carpal tunnel, right? And I was like, yeah, things haven't been feeling too good, but just been trying to ignore it. And she was like, okay, do this exercise for me. She had me pull my middle finger, try to touch my the bottom of my hand, right, the palm of my hand, and it was like, could barely go there. I was like, it was rough doing this, right? And then she grabs this part where this is like your tendon, right? She grabs this part, and your fingers are supposed to react, and mine just like, they weren't doing anything. And I was like, great, and that started getting me on this, trail of recognizing what I was doing technique wise, and recognizing how to not push myself so hard, and still be able to perform, still be able to enjoy it, but be aware of what my body's doing. A big part of that too was, not to bring it back to the mental health side, but a big part of it was the fact that I was getting nervous before shows, and my muscles were clamping up. And when your muscles clamp up, it's like the opposite action of what you're trying to do when you play. I might have been able to play those shows completely fine, but when the nerves kicked in, it was like I was trying to tell my muscles to do something when they were just dead cold, like they were hard as a rock, and they did not want to cooperate, and so being able to recognize all those things and work through the mechanics seriously is an important thing.
It is. And I did the same thing with tension. We, when the band that I was in, once we'd signed with Universal, we started playing bigger shows than we had formerly been playing pretty quickly. And I noticed that whenever I was hitting the crash, especially, it was, I got tennis elbow. So right above here. And I was like, I don't know how I've injured myself doing this. And so as I started paying attention, it was right at the last second, right before I would hit the crash, my hand would clamp down on whatever it was, and there would be this tension that came into my arm. But it didn't happen until, just right at the last second, whenever I would hit. And that's how I had injured my forearm with tennis elbow. But it's a lot the same way. It was just that tension and tightening up. Because as you said, when we hit, that energy's got to go somewhere. So some of it comes down in sound waves, some of it comes down in vibrations, and some of it goes back into our arm. And depending on how tightly we're holding that.
Yeah. And there's ways to figure out how to work around these situations, and it takes a little bit of brainstorming. I actually have a friend that plays for a major country artist. And unfortunately, he had to get surgery because the way he was playing, all the shock was coming back into his arm, and it was literally killing his nerve. Yeah. He could not grip anymore. He could not feel, like his arm would just lose feeling as he was playing. It was a really sad situation. Thankfully, he's gotten it figured out, and he had the surgery. He's good now. But one of the things that, even when I was doing the Carrie thing, so her style of music, it's interesting because it's really big. And even the type of venues that she plays, it's just like, you have this feeling of, I want to overplay when you play her music, I want to like overextend myself. And so as I was in rehearsals, I was getting pretty tired. I was really getting tired. And I noticed that Garrett had wraps on his sticks. He would fully, like, that's his drum tech knows to just wrap a couple of pairs of sticks before every show. And I thought, maybe I should take some lessons from Garrett and actually follow suit, right? So I started his drum tech, wound up a couple for me, and I started playing with the wraps on, and I go, this actually is a little bit easier to play because, one, the like it's the wrap is absorbing some of that motion, right? Some of the stick. And then also it's an easier grip. So I'm not having to grip as tightly because I know that these sticks aren't going to fly out of my hands with this, active grip on it, right? So things like that, little ways that you can help yourself during the residency too, because of the weird climate in Vegas. I was getting really cracked skin. It's like so dry. It was, I think specifically when we were there, it was just, it was especially dry. And so my thumbs were cracking and everything. And I realized, you know what, it's going to be beneficial for me to play with tape. That's the first time that I've ever played with tape too. But doing these things so that you can get through and not injure yourself is really important.
Nobody talks about that end of it. Whenever you're out playing festivals outside, you're going to different climates, your skin and how it reacts to that and how much it cracks. Yeah. Going from a super dry environment to an outdoor venue where you're sweating in the humidity to another dry environment, your skin, it just wreaks havoc on it.
Oh, it can be brutal. Yeah. And you really have to be mindful of that because that can screw up your entire show if you have this like raw hand and you're trying to do these intricate things,
Man, Garrett has such a big sound.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about sitting high. Last time I remember seeing him, he sits very low, does he not?
He does sit very low, but he has his drums angled in ways where, and I haven't actually met him in person. This is the funny thing. Like I've heard about him from his team, but there's never a time when two drummers are on the same gig, right?
Right.
Or rarely is there a time when that happens. And so they've told me the way that he's built, he's just a very tall dude and he has a very long torso. So it works for him to sit low and then have his drums angled very far out from him because he has extremely long arms from what I understand.
That's crazy.
So once again, the idea of working with your body and working with what you have.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember looking at a diagram of Michael Phelps and he looks like a fish. He looks like a dog, like his feet are flippers. They're like size 83. They're massive and his torso is so long. And I'm like, he's actually a dolphin. We just didn't know it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I've never thought about sitting above the kid as a way to take advantage of just the natural weight that's there. I like that. Now, Dion, am I saying your name right, Dion? Okay, awesome. We got another question. So I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Every time, and then you say
every time I'm like, am I saying this wrong again? Because I want to say Diane, but I keep looking. I'm like
Dion or Dion.
I know. See, next time I'm not going to ask. Next time I'm be confident.
Yeah, be confident. Dion, what's up? Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Dion. Good to see you.
You as well. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say hello because I didn't want to kick myself in the ass later for not. And I wanted to say thanks for doing this and congratulations for all of your successes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. And seriously, I love getting to enter into a room where I see other female musicians doing their thing. It's really exciting.
So before we get to your question, John, we're starting to get some gear questions, which we typically always start to get. So let's run through your gear. What do you like to use?
So let me tell you some of the studio stuff that I use, and then as well, some of the stuff I use live. So I love the vintage stuff. I have 2 Rogers kits from the 60s. One is a 63 and one's a 65. That to me I've brought it into multiple recording sessions and it just finds its way to sing and sit perfectly, So those are 2 kits that I use often in sessions. Now, as far as the live thing goes, I was traveling with one of those Rogers kits for a while. And then what ended up happening was I was on a tour and I guess they hadn't strapped down the...
No, I was going to say, no, don't tell me you took that Rogers out.
Yeah, well, thankfully the kit did not get destroyed. The headliner's kit, though, the PA fell right on it, completely destroyed his kit. And after that, I went, yeah, this is too risky. I'm not going to do this anymore. So the Rogers kits, they stay at home now. But I'm using Ludwig's classic oak kits right now on the road. And I love Ludwig. They've been just a great team to partner with. Their drums are seriously like, I love their snares. I use it all the time for both studio stuff and live stuff. They just sent me a copperphonic that I've been using. I actually used it in a session on Tuesday. And the engineer was like, dang, this snare sits perfectly in the mix. Like, especially if you're doing more like Casey Musgraves type of vibe, where it's, you're not hitting as hard, you're really just wanting that thuddy snare. That copperphonic is money. They also have a classic oak classic oak snare that has, forget what the reinforcement ring, it's a different wood. But I've been using that as well. It has a great crack to it, cuts through the mix real nice. Use it more for like gospel stuff or pop stuff. And then the Black Beauty is just a go-to. Like I've been bringing that snare out with Mickey. Use that snare on the Carrie stuff. It's just a great snare all around. So
now, how are you with Ludwig as far as one of their artists?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How long have you been with them?
I've been with them. I think I signed on with them in 2017 or 2018. I want to say.
Do they have a rep here in Nashville?
They don't. No. So everything is through email. The great thing is that they have a lot of backline out there, obviously, so they have a contact at SIR here in Nashville and also Soundcheck. And those guys, if you ever need anything, they either will send it to you directly or, Ludwig will hook you up with one of those guys in order to get the gear that you need.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have not played a Ludwig drum that I don't like yet. So they're pretty great. So what sticks? What sticks you got?
I'm using ProMark.
Gotcha.
Them as well. ProMark and Evans, they're all under the Diodario bigger company. And so, yeah, I bounced between, honestly, like I was using all these like very specific sticks that they were putting out. And then when it came to probably middle of last year, I was like, why don't I just go back to the basics? And I started picking up a pair of 5As, which is what I have here. And I'm like, these aren't too bad, yeah. And then for the Carrie stuff, like I said, because I felt like I needed to like play harder. It was almost like that type of music was drawing me to just kind of be a little bit more expressive. I ended up switching to the 5Bs for that. And then I use Evans heads on everything. I'm using the EMAD for most of my kicks. I use G2 clears for the top batter side. And G1 clears on the bottom. And yeah.
What cymbals you got?
Cymbals, I'm using Heartbeat cymbals. So I've been with that company actually for the last 10 years or so.
Really? I didn't realize they had been around that long.
Yeah, they've been around for a long time. I feel like, I guess I jumped in right at the beginning and really when they were like prototyping a lot of the cymbals that have now become their, staple series. I was testing some of those things out early on, and their team has been amazing. It's a very small operation, but at the same time, they're so kind, great people. When I've been in, a pinch where I'm like, crap, the cymbal just cracked. I need something ASAP. They're willing to send it out the next day, and just great customer service all around. So it's been hard even thinking of wanting to leave them. I think that's a company that I've been doing a lot of life with, and I'll continue to be with them for a while.
Yeah, I have companies like that as well. Aquarian, I've been with them forever, and I'm like, I don't, even if I hear another head, I'm like, that's so great, but yeah, right. Probably not gonna,
Exactly.
Heartbeat was interesting for me because I felt like at one point the churches I was showing up to play at, they all had Heartbeat cymbals. Yeah. And I felt like, is this like a marketing thing that they do? That they cornered this market, or?
Yeah, I don't really know how they got into the church world as much as they have.
Yeah, but it just got to where, especially the ride cymbal, I've seen them everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, we got to sorry, we have to cover the gear because we have inquiring minds want to know. John, what's up, man?
How are you?
Good.
Hey.
Good. Hey, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking your time. This is awesome. we truly, I personally love having these Zoom calls where we get to, dive into the world of someone like yourself. So thank you very much. I'm always curious about, what do you do for a pre-gig warm-up, or do you have any specific rituals or things that you feel like you have to go through before you get on stage?
Yeah, a lot of stretching exercises, like I said, because I have injured myself in the past. I will do just stretch out this muscle up top. So I will pull down and hold that for 30 seconds. And then also this as well. And these are exercises that literally chiropractors have told me to do, that's always something I try to, if I can, even, this sounds strange, but even doing a little bit of lifting helps for me. It helps for my muscles to feel a little bit more warmed up and ready to go. And it feels like, if I've done some exercises in the morning, by the time I actually hold sticks, it's like these things weigh nothing, comparatively. So definitely doing some of those warm-up exercises. As far as what I'll do on a pad, and even if you're doing a festival where you can't jump behind a pad before you play, you don't have a green room to really, warm up. Even just taking my sticks and doing it on my leg or doing it on a pillow, on any type of surface that isn't very bouncy. I'll do paradiddles, go through that. I will do something that I've learned from my drum teacher growing up is doing this and try to keep the wrist as straight as possible so that you're actually warming up the fingers. A lot of what I do, and once again, this depends on what type of grip that you use, but I'm working with matched grip here. So a lot of what I do is trying to get my fingers to a point where they feel like they're not tensing up, they're not cramping, and I'm able to use these small muscles to help me get some of the intricacies, some of the ghost notes, all of that in. So really kind of isolating the fingers and locking down the wrists to not be moving when I'm warming up, getting these individual fingers going. Sometimes I'll do one finger at a time. That way everything feels like, okay, the mechanics here are moving and not cramping up during the show.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to ask you, since you've been in town, have you seen Preston Wakefield? He's kind of like the guy that he used to work with the Predators and the Titans.
Right.
And then on the side did musicians. He was a chiropractor, but he does active release therapy. And he's worked on I had to go to him. Well, I just went to him a few months ago for another issue, but I haven't seen him in 10 years. And but if you ever have any wrist or leg issues from playing, Preston is the man. He's worked on everyone. And he's creepy because he'll turn your hand over and be like, oh, there it is. And I'm like, yeah, well, and he'll move the pain in the arm. I'm like, hey, just move it out of the arm. Just keep going. If you're gonna move it around. So, but he's a great guy. He's up in the Green Hills. That I think it's the Green Hills area. So
that's great. If you can shoot me that contact, and I would love to get in touch with him.
Oh yeah, I will. He's an interesting character too. So it's actually fun going to see him. So, all right, let's see here. We got any more questions, Grant?
Nothing in the chat.
Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us and talking drums.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Great to meet y'all, you guys, and best luck on your continued endeavors.
Awesome. Well, we got one more question for John. John, you got one?
No, that was a clapping motion.
Well, I can't tell that from the wave or the hand. Got you. Awesome. All right, everybody. We'll see y'all next week on Grant, what's the next live call? We got Q&A next week?
Caught me off guard. I gotta look that up.
Uh-oh. And we're gonna be giving something away on that. What are we giving away next week, Grant?
We are giving away a tackle stick bag.
Oh, well, I want that.
Yeah.
I say that every time. I want that one. Maybe I'll win it this time. No, I'll give it to somebody else. Yeah, so we got a tackle stick bag on the next Q&A call, and those are, I don't know, they're like $75. They're really nice. I love mine. I've got some tackle stuff right here. Elizabeth, do you use this? So he sent me this, the guy from Tackle, and I thought, this is the stupidest thing ever. I'm never going to use this. And he said, no, man, just put it on there. You'll use it for everything. And it attaches to your floor tom, and it's like this little pocket thing, and it's, it looks like a little purse. But if you put it just on the two lugs of your floor, Tom, and I put it there one day, and then like 3 days later, it had my whole life in it. Everything that I needed was there. I'm like, where is my marriage certificate? And I'm like, oh my God, it's right there, everything. And so anyway, get one of those. They're really useful. But I don't remember what they're called. What are they called, Grant?
I have no idea what they're called. They're just the little tackle things.
The little tackle thing. I think that's what it's listed as on their website. All right, everybody, we will see you on the next call. Did you look that up, Grant, when that is?
Oh, yeah, it's Tuesday. It's a live Q&A at noon.
Awesome. So we will see everybody next Tuesday at noon. Elizabeth, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.